And in closing, we all do share a love for cars. And our commitment at TrueCar is to do everything that we can to provide balance and support and to help you in the process of selling cars and make the process as joyful as it is to own. Thank you. So, So Cliff, I think I kept us under the right time. I've got a couple of the senior team here from TrueCar. I'd like you guys to come on at least towards the front of the stage. I was told that there would be some questions, and so just as part of that, I'd like to invite you to ask anything you want. This is sort of the free-form part, and not just of me. We've got, like I said, some of our senior team here, industry, dealer relations, business development, and represents a lot of, I think, sort of history with the company and a lot of experience in the industry. So if anybody has a question, we're happy to answer. Yep. Hang on.
My name is Brian Benstock, and I was one of your critics with the business model that you had set up. And I really appreciate you coming full circle and realizing the dealers aren't the enemy, not of you or the consumer. And I think the approach you've taken today would cause a dealership like ours to open our arms and say, let's partner up and see what we can do together. I like transparency. I think what you said here today makes a lot of good sense. And I'll take back my criticism of your former business model. I like the direction you're going.
Thank you.
We have other questions.
This is literally like an AA meeting now. Well, I think the customer owns the customer at the end of the day. The customer is always going to have the free will, depending on how they feel the experience went, to repeat an experience in the market or go after it. Once you're introduced to that customer, though, it's your customer. You can keep them for 30 years, 40 years, as long as you can. I think that there's nothing that prevents you from building a long and lasting bond. And one of the things that we, again, when we look at the data, and I know that some of you may have read this, there's an algorithm that goes on behind the scenes in the introduction of a dealer. It heavily biases proximity, and in fact, consumers act based on the proximity almost more than any other factor, followed by selection and then finally price. I think that the important thing to recognize is that the qualitative aspects of your relationship with your customer at your dealership are what's going to earn you that repeat business and that opportunity. And so we're all for, once we've made that introduction, you owning that customer. I'll also say, though, on the other side of that equation, if you take the relationships we have with USAA and Consumer Reports and the 100 other brands that we represent in terms of their goodwill and their auto buying programs, they also feel that they have a long-term relationship with their customer, and they'll continue to market to them as well. And so I think the guidance would be, it's absolutely your customer. You don't have to pay us for leads. If you don't sell them a car, they can still remain your customer if you can get them on the next purchase cycle. Does anybody else want to answer that question? Is that good? Okay.
We got a question in the middle.
Scott, Adam Barish, Route 23 Honda, New Jersey. Can you speak to, or maybe one of your team can speak to, data integrity, data security, and some of the fears that were mentioned in some of the forums?
Sure. I'll take it, but I'd love somebody else to take it as well, just so you don't hear me saying things and no one else. So there was a lot of controversy over whether or not we were going into the DMS data for anything other than tracking of a sale. And one of the unique dimensions about our business model was always that we wanted to be the first and only to introduce total accountability into what was previously a variable expense at the dealership level, advertising. And we really did design it around this concept that is ultimately the best business model for any business owner, because only paying when something sells is obviously the ideal in terms of accountability. What enables that is tracking. So in fact, what really enabled the entire business of lead generation and the migration away from newspapers and print advertising was addressability. So the internet's ability to say, I've got a customer and his name's Bernie Brenner, would you like to meet him? That's now a much better marketing in-funnel customer, because somehow Bernie's raised his hand and said, I'm in market and ready to buy a car. the trackability element means that we are genuinely aligned with your outcome. Now, as many of you know, we've had to change our business model on a state-by-state basis, and in some states, we can no longer bill on a CPA basis, and we find that regrettable for the dealers that are part of the program, because what it means is that we will never have a perfectly accountable relationship. And we believe in standing behind the product. There's a singular dimension of the data that we looked at. When all the controversy came out, we confirmed that we are only taking certain very limited fields. To be clear, the DMS data that we extract is not what drives the TrueCar curves. And that needs to be a very bright line. Nor are we fishing inside of the dealer's DMS for marketing introductions. Not only would it be a violation of every contract that we've got with every dealer, but it just would be so reprehensible and so discoverable. And there is no evidence of it because it's never happened. And so that is why we are working with the affinity groups. That's why we advertise on television. That's why we're building a brand. We're not trying to suck dealer introductions out of dealer databases. And so I think anything we can do to provide that reassurance, we need to. And in fact, today, and then I'll give it over to Bernie. Today, we have probably spent more than just about any company in automotive around data security. Most of the data that we see that comes from upstream comes unencrypted, comes completely sort of out in the open in terms of the PII that exists. We have very clear policies because of our banking partnerships and because of our insurance partnerships, where we actually have a very high bar in terms of how we handle data and how we move data, not only within our data centers, but how we compartmentalize it within the company. So I think that, again, this is going to be something that the industry has to learn over time about TrueCar. We make the open invitation that any of you can come and audit TrueCar. We will continue to be looking for other external validators that's the only use of the data, and that's how we go about it.
Thanks, Scott. I'm Bernie. I'm one of the founders of TrueCar as well. And to answer the data security question, think about, we can say any words we can say, and say that we're great and we're bulletproof on this topic. But think about our evolution around data security really came from the way we launched. When we launched with Capital One, and they were passing data over to us. And we had to be compliant with them as a public company and a financial institution. Then our next deal that we got, and I run the affinity side and signed USAA, was USAA. And this is now, they take security to a different level. They treat the name, or they require us to treat the name as if it's a social security number, even though we never get any financial information, social security number, bank accounts, or anything. But when you log into USAA, and there are probably some USAA members here, you're logging to a financial institution that has all of your information related to insurance and loans and bank accounts. And then when you come over to the USAA car buying service, which is us, it's a single sign-on. You do not have to sign on again. And so when they transfer that over, they have a tremendous amount of standards and requirements that they put on us. And when we first signed the deal, we thought we were pretty good because we were complying to Capital One standards. And as a part of the deal, we immediately had to sink another $1 million into security just to become compliant with USA. And over time, we've probably thrown another 3 or 4 million into that. So I would think from a partner standpoint, many of you have all dealerships have so many vendors. We are up to the standards of USA and American Express and US Bank and Penn Fed Credit Union, and we have to live up to their standards. It's not just our arbitrary standards. They impose these on us, and they audit us every year. And I'm happy to provide additional information.
So let me just add one thought, because today's conversation with you was about contrition and about telling you a story about how we've listened and learned. And one of the things that I think you'll find if you really dig into this, and we welcome the conversation about data even after this is one of the areas where there's a lot of misinformation, and this is one of the areas where there's been a lot of detractors who have put out misinformation. This happens to be an area that we're very proud of and that we're